Abyssinia. Abyssinia, otherwise known as the Ethiopian Empire, began in 1270 AD and lasted all the way until 1974, when the monarchy was overthrown in a military coup by Marxist rebels. During its long reign, the Ethiopian Empire would enjoy centuries of prosperity. Despite facing an Ottoman invasion in the 16th century, with the help of the Portuguese, they were able to protect their kingdom and keep it under Christian rule. Curiously, the Ethiopian Empire was ruled by the claimed descendants of the biblical King Solomon and Queen of Sheba, believing they were a lost tribe of Judah. The Ethiopian Empire reached its peak during the late 1800s and early 1900s. Under Emperor Menelik II's reign, he was successful in defending against invading Italian forces, and his modernization of the kingdom by incorporating railroads, telegraphs, and establishing schools and hospitals produced a thriving culture. Although the Italians did occupy the empire for 5 brief years during World War II, they never fully controlled it, and to this day, Ethiopia remains to be the only African country that has never been colonized by a European power. Austria-Hungary. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, otherwise known as the Dual Monarchy, existed between the years of 1867 to 1918. It was a union between the two countries that also included parts of the Czech Republic, Italy, Romania, Poland, and the Balkans. During its time, it was one of the largest and most powerful European empires, playing a significant role in European politics and diplomacy, as they were allied with Germany and Italy. Unfortunately, things would quickly fall apart for this short-lived alliance of the two nations. For one, this empire was extremely multi-ethnic, ruling over a vast number of groups of people that were becoming increasingly nationalistic among themselves, meaning that there was non-stop tension that led to frequent riots and overall unhappiness. The empire's political system was seen as outdated and ineffective by its own people, as they faced high levels of debt and inflation, as well as a lack of industrialization and modernization in certain regions. During World War I, they suffered a series of brutal military defeats, especially the Battle of Vittorio Veneto, which would ultimately spell the end for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The 1919 Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye would dissolve the empire into 4 independent states: Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia. Byzantine Empire. In 330 AD, Constantine the Great would become the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity, changing the official state religion of Rome entirely. Instantly, he wanted to move the capital of Rome to the city of Byzantium, located in present-day Turkey, in order to reflect his new Christian beliefs that would begin a new era for the empire. 65 years later, after the death of Emperor Theodosius I, his 2 sons Acratius and Honorius would rule the Western and Eastern Roman empires as 2 separate political entities. Western Rome would be quick to fall in 476 AD, but Eastern Rome would continue for another 1,000 years. Eastern Rome, or the Byzantine Empire, would undergo many ups and downs throughout its history. Positively speaking, great leaders like Justinian I would rule with an iron fist, stomping out barbarian invaders and establishing the Justinian legal code, which became the basis for much of Western European law. That being said, the Byzantine Empire faced many incredible hardships, including the religious schism with the Catholic Church, causing a separation of faith between Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox Christians. While this was happening, Islam was rising and became a major threat to Old Europe and the remaining Eastern Roman Empire. The capital city of Byzantium, later renamed to Constantinople, was believed to be an impossible city to conquer geographically because it was surrounded by water and mountains. In the mid-1400s, Islamic Ottoman forces, led by Sultan Mehmet II, had to get creative and think outside the box, as even though they greatly outnumbered the weakened and puny Byzantine military, the geographic stronghold they had was still almost impenetrable. This led to the Ottomans developing giant cannons and performing crazy militaristic feats, such as literally dragging their ships across the mountains by hand in order to enter the restricted sea and attack the weaker part of the city. Once Constantinople fell, it was renamed to Istanbul and became the capital of the Ottoman Empire, marking the true end of Rome. Corsica. Corsica is an island off the coasts of France and Italy, and it has historically been ruled by many different groups of people. In ancient times, it was ruled by the Etruscans, the Carthaginians, and the Greeks, until it was fully conquered by Rome in the 2nd century BC. After the fall of Western Rome in 476 AD, it would eventually be ruled by the Italian city-state of Genoa for a long period of time. Fast forward all the way to 1729, the Corsican Revolution for Independence began, and after 26 years of struggle and fighting against the Republic of Genoa, Corsican independence was declared and the Corsican Republic began drafting a constitution. Unfortunately, the country of Corsica wouldn't last very long, since they were entirely unable to eject the Genoese from the major coastal fortresses of Calvi and Bonifacio. In 1767, Genoa sold the island to France, and French forces would arrive to Corsica to quickly stomp out the independence. Although Corsica was allied with the British Empire, who were no fans of the French, no British military support arrived to help Corsica. Finally, during the French Revolution, Corsica did receive military support from the British, and it would become independent again, until the British left the country in 1796, and it was instantly reconquered by the French. Despite the fact that Napoleon was born in Corsica, his government would also neglect the island in favor of much larger ambitions. Gran Columbia. Gran Columbia was a state that encompassed much of northern South America and part of Central America. When it came to international recognition regarding the legitimacy of this nation, however, Europe was not down to say the least. Austria, France, and Russia only recognized Gran Columbia's independence if Gran Columbia accepted their governments, which they didn't. Most European countries also disagreed over the boundaries of the Colombian territory. Within Gran Columbia itself, there was a lot of disagreement between people who supported a centralized government with a strong presidency versus those who supported a decentralized federal form of government. This led to political instability that would curse the country during its very short reign. In 1831, Gran Columbia was dissolved into the states of New Granada, Ecuador, and Venezuela, with Panama later separating from Colombia in 1903. The Confederate States of America. The Confederacy was a group of 11 states in the United States that split from the Union and declared their independence in response to the suspicion that Abraham Lincoln was going to abolish the slavery of African Americans. Slavery was something that the Confederacy considered vital to their economy, and they figured without it that their way of life would be destroyed. On the contrary, Abraham Lincoln believed slavery was economically inefficient and hindered the development of the country, believing instead that free labor was more productive. He also had moral quandaries with slavery, and believed it was a source of conflict and division that would lead to the destruction of America in the long term. After a brutal American Civil War, the Confederacy ended up surrendering, although not before President Lincoln himself was assassinated by a Confederate sympathizer while attending a play in Washington, D.C. After the war, each state that rebelled against the United States was readmitted to the Congress after ratifying the 13th Amendment, which outlawed slavery forever. The Ottoman Empire. Sometimes considered to be the Islamic version of the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire was a force to be reckoned with during its long-lasting run, giving Eastern Europe a run for their money, to put it simply. The Ottoman Empire was known for its incredible military strength. As mentioned earlier, their conquest of Constantinople and the destruction of Eastern Rome has been heavily studied by historians, leaving many baffled at how they pulled it off. Their thirst for blood didn't end in modern-day Turkey, as at their peak, they controlled Greece, the Balkans, Ukraine, and parts of Hungary. Their military was known for its early use of gunpowder weapons, including cannons and muskets, and their soldiers were heavily trained and disciplined. Unfortunately, after the European Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution, it became very difficult for the Ottomans to compete with Europe. The 1683 Battle of Vienna was also a devastating blow for the Ottomans. After this battle, they would slowly lose control of European land. Greece became independent in 1830, and in 1878, the Congress of Berlin declared Romania, Serbia, and Bulgaria independent of Ottoman rule. World War I would be the final nail in the coffin for the empire. The Ottomans joined the global conflict fighting for the side of Germany and the Central Powers, but would be defeated in 1918. 4 years later, the Ottoman Empire ended and the Republic of Turkey began, where efforts to secularize and westernize the country immediately took place. Prussia. Established in 1917, the Kingdom of Prussia played a significant role in the unification of Germany during the 19th century. Prussia was known for its highly disciplined and professional army, being one of the most powerful in Europe. They were able to expand their border multiple times, and became Austria's greatest rival since both nations wanted total control of Germany. However, once Napoleon arrived on the scene, Prussia ended up losing a lot of its land to the French from 1803 to 1815. At the same time, however, they were winning against Austria, and did become the dominant power in and Germany. In 1870, Prussia, being led by Otto von Bismarck, which controlled the now unified Germany, would go to war with France once again. But as this conflict would play out, Prussia would slowly begin to lose their identity, as they were becoming increasingly more German. Eventually, in 1947, after World War II, Prussia was dissolved, with its land being divided between the Soviet Union and Poland. Taiwan. Taiwan is an island off the east coast of China that has a very long and complicated history, and its story is still currently being written. Prior to the 1600s, Taiwan was self-governing. However, there was never any central ruling authority. The Netherlands seized control of the island for about 40 years during the mid-1600s, but after that, the country became independent again for 2 more decades, until China would gain control of Taiwan in the late 1600s. They ruled Taiwan for 2 centuries, until Japan acquired the island in 1895, declaring it a Japanese colony. After World War II, Taiwan was returned to nationalist Chinese control. 4 years later, while Taiwan was undergoing a communist takeover, nationalist Chinese forces fled to Taiwan, resulting in a separation between Taiwan and China. Ever since then, Communist China has claimed jurisdiction over Taiwan, but in the 1900s, Taiwan's government denied this claim. To this day, China maintains that they control Taiwan, stating a one China policy that asserts that there is only one sovereign state under the name of China, which includes both the mainland and Taiwan. Very few countries internationally disagree with China, and even support for an independent Taiwan within the island itself is mixed. A Taiwanese Public Opinion Foundation poll conducted in June 2020 found that 54% of respondents supported the independence, 23.4% preferred maintaining the status quo, and 12.5% supported unification with China, while 10% reported they had no opinion on the matter. China itself has not ruled out using lethal force to destroy Taiwanese nationalists, causing many around the globe to worry about what the implications of this violence would lead to globally. Texas. Of all the states in the United States, one could argue that Texas has the richest history, as it's been part of 6 countries in its lifetime. Texas was once a part of Spain, France, Mexico, its own country, the Confederacy, and currently the United States. After Napoleon had crushed Spain during his conquest of Europe, unrest in many Spanish colonies overseas skyrocketed, and Mexico was quick to seize the opportunities and establish its independence. Originally, Mexico is much larger than it is today, as it owned many now present-day states in the US, including Texas. After Mexico separated from Spain, it wouldn't be a full 16 years later before Texas split from Mexico, for a variety of reasons. For one, Mexico's government had become increasingly centralized, abolishing their Constitution of 1824 that gave states more freedom within Mexico, in favor of a new constitution that gave the federal government more power. Texas was also culturally American, with many of these settlers coming from Southern American states, who established lives in Texas due to its rich land and promising history. They enjoyed Southern American laws, including slavery, which was illegal in Mexico. It was only a matter of time before war would take place, and after a fierce 6 months, Texan forces led by Sam Houston defeated Mexico's General Santa Anna, forcing him to sign a treaty recognizing Texas as an independent nation. 1 decade later, Texas joined the United States, immediately thrusting the US into a war with Mexico, which they would also win. Tibet. Tibet rests in the southeastern corner of China. After the Qing dynasty of China fell in 1912 and the Republic of China formed, the region of Tibet, led by Dalai Lama, immediately declared independence, stating that they were only loyal to the Qing dynasty and that without it, they would be independently ruled. However, most countries around the world refused to recognize Tibet as an independent nation. This era of Tibetan independence would last until 1951, when a now fully unified communist China instantly annexed the nation. Today, Tenzin Gyatso, the current Dalai Lama, no longer calls for Tibetan independence, although one wonders if he genuinely has this opinion or if he just doesn't want to upset the Chinese government. Whether or not there is still strong nationalistic leaning in Tibet remains unknown. The USSR. Russia is the largest country in the world, but not so long ago it was much larger. The USSR was a socialist state, and it was the first country to be based on Marxist socialism, existing for almost 70 years and becoming a cold competitor with the United States. During the Russian Civil War in 1917, the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, would emerge victorious and establish the Soviet Union. After Lenin died in 1924, Joseph Stalin would take power, enforcing a strict collectivization of the agricultural sector, meaning that land and livestock owners were forced to give up what they owned. Hundreds of thousands of them were rounded up and executed in Russia's infamous gulags. It's estimated that Joseph Stalin was responsible for 20 million or more deaths, due to his ruthless executions of any perceived political enemies, the famines that resulted from his destruction of agriculture, and his deportation of minorities and suppression of religious groups. The USSR would enter a Cold War with the United States, as they competed for economic power while also constantly preparing for a total nuclear war, which left many Americans believing that the end of the world was soon, although this never took place. Instead, America and the Soviets competed for things like scientific victories, such as the infamous space race. The Soviets were the first to launch a satellite, and then later a human being into space, while Americans were the first to put a man on the moon. Eventually, communist fatigue would catch up with the nation, as Soviet citizens often did not have food or clothing and suffered under poor living conditions. In the 1980s, the United States isolated the Soviet economy from the rest of the world by helping drive oil proxies to their lowest levels in decades, causing the Soviet Union's oil and gas revenue to drop dramatically, all while, at the same time, they were losing political relevance in Eastern Europe. The toppling of the Berlin Wall in 1989 represented the symbolic and realistic end of the Cold War and the Soviet Union itself, as the wall had previously presented a physical and ideological barrier that divided the eastern communist side of Berlin and the western capitalist side. On Christmas Day, 1991, the Soviet Union was disbanded, with Russia becoming a nation with a president and 3 branches of government, like the United States.